Are you so busy that you constantly feel unable to secure some clear headspace? Are you unsatisfied with your current job and feel anxious when you think about the future? Are you wondering why you always seem to have relationship problems? The simple answer to these, and many other common problems of the modern world, can be found in a recent Japanese bestseller called The Practice of Not Reacting. In this video, we'll delve into the self-help wisdom of Ryushun Kusanagi, a prolific author and Buddhist monk. Contrary to popular belief, Buddhism isn't what we normally think of when we hear the word religion. And Kusanagi is quick to point out that his book is a rational, problem-solving manual that just happens to have been road-tested for over 2,500 years. According to the author, any human problem, even the most intolerable suffering, can be resolved. Here we go. Let's begin at the end. The book concludes that the key to solving your woes is to stop reacting. Buddha suggested that stress is not a product of what is happening in front of us in the real world, but the output of our own inner, mental reactions. The long queue at the supermarket after a hard day at work is frustrating, isn't it? This is wrong, says Buddha. You've simply not identified the essential cause of the stress you're feeling. Okay, so maybe the problem isn't the supermarket queue itself.
Perhaps it's just one of the more visible symptoms of a culture of overwork, abusive management, and stagnating wages that are as much a source of stress for the supermarket employees and everyone else in line as they are for you.
No, says Buddha. You're looking at this all wrong. Not everyone in the long queue is irritated. Some appear bored. Others don't mind at all. In other words, even in an identical situation within the same environment, levels of worry and stress are different.
So the problem isn't understaffing, faulty barcodes, or queue jumpers, but how you choose to react.
On Monday evening, you might be tempted to call in a full-scale airstrike on a queue jumper. But on a Thursday evening, perhaps you're more likely to end up having a cozy chat.
You might even end up adding them to your social media circle in the enlightened spurt of like me, like me. Before those of you who don't outsource thinking to your mobile phone start saying, that's fine for the first world problems like supermarket queues. But what if I'm in line for a genocidal trip to the shower block?
Let's be clear that Kusanagi is talking about unnecessary reactions.
It may seem like a tall order for anyone who isn't a monk, spending hours every day decluttering their mind. But that's probably just you, reacting badly to something that millions of ordinary Japanese people already insist works for them.
According to Kusanagi's latest bestseller, there are two main ways to avoid unnecessary reactions. The first is to become an objective observer of your own reactions, without consciously exerting control over them.
Yeah, it's exactly the same with mindfulness practice you gave up after 3 days.
Not controlling own mind is very difficult for those who grew up in Japan. Let's clarify that it aligns perfectly with a culture dedicated to harmony and groupthink, which encourages everyone to install a policeman in their head at a very young age. Kusanagi suggests that the human mind is hardwired to seek pleasure as the default route to joy and happiness.
You start out wanting to be warm, dry, and well-fed. Before you know it, you're running up Maslow's pyramid of psychological needs like a headless chicken.
The basic desire for survival almost inevitably ladders up to a desire for the finer things, until it hits the lofty peak, a desire for approval. These desires are the source of our confusion and suffering, says Buddha.
Of course, as an aristocrat, he probably had every need met at birth, and may well have gained a little weight from not needing to run up that pyramid.
We digress. The key to mitigating the suffering of unnecessary reactions is to install a third-party perspective. Avoid the temptation to transfer your annoyance with a clueless and irresponsible boss by treating a junior colleague poorly. This is the classic pattern, the cycle of abuse, that accounts for so many ills in our society.
Billionaires are stopping you getting your fair share, so let's scapegoat the less fortunate.
Kusanagi suggests the first step is to take a long, hard look at yourself and start sticking labels on your reactions. I am frustrated. I am depressed. I am sad. Then you give yourself a good talking to. Show yourself a bit of TLC and become your own best friend. Hey, I know exactly how you feel, but if you bring your anger into the next meeting, it isn't going to do anyone any good. Some psychologists suggest that 6 seconds is all it takes to ease away feelings of anger. Okay, but what should we do when we can't identify why we're so upset? Those moments of unspecified rage and frustration. The key, according to Kusanagi, is to process your response through that hierarchy of needs and desires. Trace your steps back down the pyramid until you hit an unmet desire that is upsetting the balance. Whatever is happening in the real world, you automatically look inward for the real source of your worries.
It's not your shitty job or your asshole boss making you unhappy. It's the worries you trigger deep inside.
On those days when everyone sounds like they're talking total rubbish, it doesn't really matter whether they are talking total rubbish or not. What matters is how this triggers a negative response by rubbing up against your deeply held the need for recognition and approval. Reacting to the world with this perfectly natural desire almost inevitably means that everyone fails to live up to our expectations and provokes negative feelings. As luck would have it, the very act of going in search of the reasons for your reaction provides that 6-second interlude for you to calm down. If all else fails, write down your feelings and action plans within 3 to 5 minutes. This takes even more time and effort, forcing you to detach from the situation
and focus purely on me. If an evil regime, or a despicable boss, was looking to create a social engineering tool that pacified the population, what could be better than a very pragmatic-sounding religion that says, it's okay to make it all your own personal responsibility? Take a deep breath, sing a chorus of Que sera sera, and just let it all go. How fabulous would the world be if our response to suffering, even in our immediate vicinity, was, hey buddy, not my problem. Just give me a second or two to moderate my reaction. The trouble is that most of us feel the world has been such a total shit show for so long that acute compassion fatigue is almost unavoidable. In which case, Kusanagi is right. Policing your reactions works, and you'll feel much better.
Let's look at the second part of the miracle cure for what's troubling you. Stop judging. Even in the modern world of information overload, Kusanagi tells us that we don't have all the facts and tend to leap to judgment. Snap judgments deliver a momentary spike in satisfaction levels. Publish your diagnosis on social media, and chances are, no matter how misinformed you are, there will be someone who agrees with you and helps to provide that reassuring hit of confirmation bias. We extend judgment to people and situations that have no immediate impact on our personal lives. But trading careless comments for comforting approval becomes addictive. Before you know it, precious time is being invested in decisions that are unnecessary. The psychological principle of commitment and consistency kicks in, making it difficult to take back anything, which provides a disincentive to learn more and reconsider. Of course, getting into the habit of making rash judgments about others can make you prone to doing the same thing when you decide not to take a long hard look at yourself. Unattractive overconfidence can almost be less damaging than the self-denial that often results. My presentation went badly, my career is over. I ate a bag of potato chips while I'm on diet, I'm a hopeless failure. Social media has helped to feed a voyeuristic culture of nervous states, ramping up the appetite for approval and the frequency of lazy comparisons that lead to self-condemnation. Repeated self-denial can lead to aggression, and not only towards others. Diagnosed cases of depression are up, and suicide is an increasingly common cause of death. So how do we break the habit of making needless judgments? Kusanagi tells us that the first step is to realize that judgment is a figment of your imagination. It exists only in your mind. Once you realize it's just an electrical impulse in your brain, it's easier to dismiss the significance. Oops, I was judgmental again. That's okay, nothing really matters. Ignore it. Of course, there are times when we're called upon to make judgment calls, especially at work. For this reason, says Kusanagi. It is important to set criteria that help you to avoid making unnecessary decisions. Simply ask the question, is this judgment true and beneficial to those around me?
In government offices and executive boardrooms across Japan, you can already see this kind of passive self-protection in action. Entire civilizations have been known to rise and fall in the time it takes the elderly power brokers to make a judgment call. That said, the average age of these key decision makers can make it difficult to distinguish a practiced lack of reaction from early onset dementia. And somehow, when push comes to shove, the outcome still tends to be deeply reactionary. Go figure. In ancient Rome, a Syrian-born slave and mime artist, who is known to posterity as Publilius Cyrus, authored a collection of moral maxims that included the well-known phrase, "Ignorance is bliss." William Shakespeare, a South London author who had to compete with bear pits and church-owned brothels for his audience, was notorious for pilfering such ideas from classical writers. There is nothing either good or bad, but thinking makes it so, he says in his most famous work. This begs the question whether Kusanagi really is offering us a solution to human suffering, or just a very well-established means to consciously pretend it doesn't exist. Learning to take the view that the glass is half full has become a popular approach to dealing with that instinctive feeling that something is very wrong in our societies. A whole new generation of cognitive psychologists, like Steven Pinker, suggest that all the available data points to things getting better for everyone. Although unlike Kusanagi, he chooses not to take the view that data is invariably flawed and can never reveal the whole story. Who knows? Perhaps it is time to take a leaf from the Kusanagi's playbook and ask whether all the public intellectuals failing to make us all feel better are actually driven by a deep-seated desire for approval from powerful elites, whose interests are best served by growing social division and a doomed planet. Or are we just rushing to judgment here? You decide.
Kusanagi's book offers a form of quiet quitting that is thousands of years old and can offer a highly effective, comforting way to deal with everyday issues. If the most serious problem you face is office politics or a poor retail experience, this will almost certainly offer you the key to dialing down the noise and going with flow.
If deep down, you believe that it is fundamentally impossible for us to collectively strive towards a world that makes us all feel better, then this is the bedside reading for you. Instead of redirecting your anger where it belongs, in no time at all, you'll be able to glide through life, unruffled by the weeping and gnashing of teeth going on around you. After all, why should you exhaust yourself trying to understand the underlying causes of human suffering, when you can simply buy a quick start guide to pretending it's all just in your head? Instant noodles for the soul, comfort food for the troubled mind. Plain and simple. How do you think? We'd like to know your opinion.
Thank you for watching. If you enjoy this video, don't forget subscribe.